that I built previously for my channel were mostly really simple. Few of my subscribers mentioned that it would be great to see the development process of control that is more complicated. I compared classic and UCI clients, and one of the gaps between those clients is Composite Control that were introduced in version 2013 but did not make it to the UCI interface. In this video, I will create Composite Control for the UCI interface.
There are two types of composite fields available in Classic UI. One for the address and one for the full name. In my video I will demonstrate how to create the second one, full name control. Once full name field is clicked, user gets the pop-up with first name and last name fields and done button that closes the pop-up. And as a result, user gets full name field populated based on entered values and formatted according to the system settings. I have created the folder for the control. After that, I run PCF init command to initialize the PCF project, install all of required packages using npm install command, and install React, React DOM, and Office UI Fabric React packages that I will use to build the control. I open project using VS Code and navigate to control manifest.input.xml file to configure controls metadata. I rename sample property to full name and add properties for first name, middle name, and last name fields. Once that's done, I run command npm run script build command to rebuild manifest types.ts file according to modified manifest file. The next step is development of React control that I will use. I add new file to the project and call it Composite Control TS6. I add usage of React package and create Composite Control class that inherits React.component class. Initially, I will show the control as a simple text field that shows the full name. To pass the data inside the component, I declare iCompositeControl props interface that declares properties that are passed from full name control component. I implement render method that is responsible for rendering of the component. I use text field component from Office UI Fabric controls to display the field. Value for the component is passed through properties and component has to be read-only, so I configure it using component properties. The next step is usage of Composite Control component inside full name control. But before using it, I have to do some preparations. I will use container in both init and update view methods, so I create a private property for it and assign value to it inside init method. Rendering part of code will be the same for both init and update view methods, so I create render control method with context parameter for reusage purpose and add a call to both places. Full name has to be composed from first, middle, and last name pieces, so I add getFullName method that does required checks and concatenation. After that, I use getFullName method in render control to get full name from parts that are available inside the context. I declare Composite Control properties using full name. On the next step, I call render method to render control passing instance of Composite Control and container parameters inside. Also, I call React DOM unmount component add node to remove components from DOM, clean up events, event handlers, and state. And now it's time to see first results. In order to do that, I open console and run npm start watch command. Once all checks are completed and component is built, I can see component in the browser. The next step is implementation of Popup functionality. I will use callout component available in Office UI React package. Office UI controls not only powerful and easy to use, but well documented as well. Microsoft Office UI Fabric website contains many examples that can be reused during development of your components. In order to use callout component, I need to declare state interface that I will use in my component, so I declare Composite Control state interface with isCallout visible property. I add state to declaration of class, add constructor to class, and initialize state with isCallout visible property that is equal to false, so popup is not visible initially. In the first step, I just use pieces of code provided in developer website to add the callout to the component. Popup has to be shown when full name field is clicked and hidden when it loses focus. To implement this, I add show popup and hide popup methods and use it inside the component. As a temporary content for popup, I use static text to see if it works at all. I return to the browser, click on the full name field and see that popup works, appears when the field is clicked and disappears when popup loses the focus. In order to achieve my goal, I have to show fields with labels and button inside my popup. To do that, I use other Office UI Fabric React component called stack. I add stack inside callout and add 3 fields for each of name boxes and configure it. For every of name text fields, I add properties label that displays text shown near the text box, placeholder that will show 3 dashes when field is empty. Once configuration is completed, I open browser and check updated layout of the component. The next step is adding of communication between outer full name control component and internal composite control component. To do that, I extend existing iComposite control props interface with 3 additional properties for each of 3 parts of the name and add the code to constructor that passes values from props to state. The next step is to bind state properties to value property of each of text boxes. Once that is completed, I navigate back to index.ts file and add the code that passes name parts to composite control. After this piece of configuration is completed, I open browser and check updated version of the component. The next task is implementation of the code that will transport updated parts of the name from composite control component to outer full name control and notify platform about updated values. In order to do that, I declare additional interface iname that contains 3 properties for each of name parts. To make code easier to read and maintain, I remove same 3 properties from both props and state interfaces and extend both with iname interface. Also, I add onNameChanged that will contain handler to call when any of name properties is changed. After this, I go back to index.ts and add onNameChanged handler to initialization of iComposite control props. I will have a need to use notify output changed in my onNameChanged handler, So I create a property for it in the class and assign value to it in init method. Code of the handler is simple. Once it is called, an updated name is passed inside. I store a name to local property that will be available for getOutputs method and call notify output changed. The next step is development of the code for getOutputs method. It's basically just transferring of properties from one object to another. Now, to make all components work, I navigate to Composite Control TSX and add onChange handlers to each of text field components. Once this is completed, I open browser and verify that everything works as expected. Fields are editable and full name is composed from first name, middle name and last name. The next part is related to styling and making component prettier. First step. Initially I hard-coded labels for name fields. That's not how it should work. Component has to get labels from the metadata of bound properties. To do that, I extend props interface with 3 new string properties that will contain labels. I use those 3 properties in configuration of text fields. After that, I open index.ts and populate introduced properties with labels received from the metadata. Let's test it again in the browser. Don't be confused with labels shown. This is how Hernet's sandboxes attributes metadata. In the real instance, it will look as it should. I will demonstrate this in the video later. Step 2. In UCI interface, labels for fields are located on the left side of it, so let's follow this styling. To do that, I add 2 more stacks, one for labels and the second with horizontal orientation to hold both stacks with labels and fields. I add 3 labels to first stack and move text displayed from text field to label. Let's jump back to browser. I'm almost there. The third and the last step in prettifying the button. I add the button to the stack with fields, provide the label for it, and handler that closes Popup. Let's run the browser again and test how everything works together. I omitted the part of the process where I pack the control into the solution, import it into the CDS instance and configure component on the form of contact entity. Let's see how it works. Popup appears, labels are taken from the attributes metadata, full name field is composed from first name, middle name and last name. Obviously, there is a field for enhancements, full following of UCI styling for fields and labels, usage of system configured format for the full name, and so on. But I decided not to overload this video and make it clear and short as possible. Thanks for watching. Click thumb up under this video if you liked it. Stay tuned.